There's so many ways to say what is the essence of art of conducting. I like what Wolfgang Riem said about that. It's about guiding, forming, and let it happen. I think that's the best way. Guiding is the base of conducting. Hold it together and guiding the musicians. Forming goes a step further. It's interpretation, to form something, to really make sense to a piece. But I think the big art of conducting, and that's why older, more experienced conductor lived all their life with that, know how to let music sound, how to let musicians express, of course, in the frame they give, in the inspiration they give to the musicians, in the guidelines they give. But a good conductor is a conductor who makes him feel, obsolete, not necessary anymore. Of course, he needs to keep the hands on the orchestra. There's no other way, but he should give the impression it's the musicians and the music making the music and not the conductor. Gestures as a conductor, obviously, that's very important to make certain effects. We just need to be very careful about gestures. The gestures make the music. Especially as a young conductor, you try to find a certain repertoire of gestures to make a certain expression, to make the music sound a certain way. The danger is that the gestures become exterior and not based on the music. The more I do this job, I think it's very important that the imagination of the sound, the weight of the sound, the approach, like you play a piano, when you want to play a strong chord, you do this, and when you play a soft melody, you stroke the keys of the piano. It's the same like playing an instrument. The gestures should follow the imagination of the sound, and then they will give somehow the right gestures.
Philippe's conducting is some of the most beautiful conducting, just simply physically beautiful conducting in the business today. He has an aesthetic will about himself that I find very, very appealing. His technical ability, simply with Baton and Orchestra, is not only incredibly clear, but because of this amazing musicality of Philippe, it's also very beautiful to watch him draw out of his resources this almost visual musicality that comes from him.
I think music always was around me. My father was a conductor, my mother was a ballet dancer. The scores were at our home, there were the records. It was always something which fascinated me and got my attention immediately. When I heard music, I was listening immediately. When I saw a piano, I tried to express myself. So it was something very, very strong, which was clear for me. I always want to be with that. And I remember when I was visiting in my school holidays, my father conducting rehearsals, dress rehearsals. I think it was a magic flute or a Valkyrie in the United States, where it was just so fascinating to see the stage, singers, an orchestra, and how my father could work on beautiful music, on amazing music, but with a lot of people together. This was something very fascinating for me.
I've known him for many, many years. What is just immediately overwhelming when you have anything to do with Philippe musically is his unbelievable musicality. He's just vibrates with music. He thinks music. He's a very smart guy, and he's got all the intellectual abilities musically that one could possibly want. But far more important, there's just this passion about making music, and that's extremely infectious.
I have a very strong relationship with my father, because already making the decision to be a conductor, so doing the same job as him, can be problematic. And I was lucky enough not to have the famous Kleiber syndrome, where you have to suffer or have problems with your father. I was 20 years old. I was in my first job at the Ulm Ulmer Theater. And Alexander Kluge came to film our last rehearsals to somehow present the operas to a larger audience. And I always had the pleasure to play some excerpts of the piece on the piano, and we did this several times. And this was a nice first encounter.
Wozzeck, zeig mir jetzt die Zunge. Der Vorhang fällt anfangs sehr schnell, dann plötzlich sehr langsam, sich ganz allmählich zu schließen.
I made my career as a conductor in a very traditional way, I would say. I never studied conducting at a music school. I was studying piano, composition, and I made this old traditional way as Gustav Mahler or Bruno Walter or Savali Shakarian did. I was a piano coach at a smaller German theater in Ulm, where you had the possibilities to learn the job properly and learn your repertoire.
Was zitterst? Der Nachttau fällt. Wer kalt ist, den friert nicht mehr. Dich wird beim Morgentau nicht frieren.
This brought me very fast to Daniel Barenboim. I was his assistant at the Staatsoper unter den Linden.
When Philippe Jordan came to audition in order to become my assistant, he was very young. He was 23 years old and he was very shy. The season that September opened with Christophe Colomb, opera by Darius Milhaud. And whoever it was that conducted it cancelled his coming in May. Well, you try and find somebody who knows the piece and is willing to come. So I asked Philippe, I said, do you feel you could conduct this? He said, but it's a premiere. He said, he's very, very modest, and sometimes modesty borders on unsureness. I think that he took care of it since then. But he says, I don't know, do you think I can do it? I said, yes, otherwise I wouldn't ask you. And when he said, then I will do it. So over the summer he learned it. Beginning of September came the first rehearsal. Very tricky score for the orchestra, with off-stage music and chorus and I don't know what. And he came, first thing he did, he closed the score and he rehearsed from memory. And he had the orchestra in his hand in 5 minutes.
I was his assistant, and this brought me to Graz, which was my first job as a music director. Mein eigenes Orchester zu haben, ein eigenes Haus zu führen, das wird mir fehlen, weil es ist für einen Dirigent sehr, sehr wichtig, mit seinem eigenen Orchester zu arbeiten, vor allem seine eigenen Klangvisionen zu erarbeiten, einen Stil zu prägen und so. Und das braucht Zeit und dafür braucht man Arbeit mit einem eigenen Orchester. Wenn ich an der Met das Orchester bediene, fahre ich einen super Ferrari, aber das ist der Ferrari von James Levine. Das ist das Gleiche, die Staatskapelle in Berlin ist Barenboims Orchester. Die fahren mit ihrem Klang. Und das ist einerseits sehr, sehr schön, weil man fährt ein tolles Auto, aber das ist leider nicht meins.
Tschüss, tschüss.
Philippe Jordan, bis vor kurzem Musikdirektor der Grazer Oper, steht am Beginn einer internationalen Karriere. Cosi fan tutte dirigiert er betont langsam als psychologisch fein ausgelotetes Seelendrama.
Performing Mozart in general is a challenge because I think Mozart, there's no other perfect composer than Mozart. Everything is in a perfect shape between melody, harmony and rhythm and human content. So if it's a Mozart opera or a sonata or a piano concerto, the challenge is always that you have to be between perfect technical playing and execution beautiful sound producing, and a very energetic and human way of playing Mozart. He has been probably the most human composer somehow, as a human being. He lived his life, and you have to hear this in his music. So you're always going this way between musical perfection and purity, which the music is, and being very strong in life. And this way to go is not always easy, either for musicians, art singers, art conductors, and I would say even for stage directors in the operas. In the opera, I usually go through the text or the scenario, the scenes, the dramaturgy. And in Wagner, it's even more, because all in Wagner is about the text. We never should forget that.
Die Ouvertüre ist ja eigentlich ein Programm für die ganze Oper. Und wir haben die Venusbergwelt gegen die geistliche bzw. bürgerliche Welt. In der Ouvertüre wird diese bürgerliche Welt durch diese geistliche Welt, also durch die Pilgerchöre, repräsentiert. Und im Mittelteil haben wir dann die Venusbergmusik, diese sinnliche Musik, die dann im Höhepunkt sozusagen in diesem Preislied Diatöne Lob, die Wunder seien gepriesen, dann gipfelt. Also haben wir sozusagen diese beiden Welten nebeneinander gestellt. Wobei ich finde es interessant, es ist nicht nur nebeneinander gestellt, sondern es ist auch übereinander. Also das heißt, gleich zu Beginn, wenn die Posaunen den Choral des Pilgerchors übernehmen, haben die Streicher diese diese Figurationen, die dann im Venusberg sehr wichtig werden, die dann doppelt so schnell werden. Das heißt, diese Doppelbödigkeit ist auch Programm in dieser Oper. Und dass letztendlich diese Venusbergwelt von der bürgerlichen Welt gar nicht so zu trennen ist.
Mit Philippe Jordan war es meine erste Zusammenarbeit. Die Herrendirigenten haben selten Zeit für die Regie, kommen im letzten Moment dazu und dann muss es irgendwie zusammengehen. Das war hier nicht der Fall. Man hat also wirklich mit den Sängern gearbeitet. Er hat seine Vorstellung gesagt, er hat meine Vorstellung gesehen. Es gab eine kreative Diskussion hier und da und damit war das Zusammenreimen von Musik und Szene höchst erfreulich, so wie ich mir das eigentlich vorstelle.
Those years followed a lot of years as a pioneer, traveling through the world, North America, Europe, to discover all different kind of orchestras, festivals, opera houses, to see how the job works everywhere and what are the specialties on each place, and which brought me at the end to the Paris Opera, where I've been now for 7 years. Of course, I had to convince my father. It was absolutely clear that he saw that talent, but he had to see, is this the right job? And it took a while, but at some moment when he saw that there was sincere will to work for it and paired with the talent, he was very proud and very loving, following my way. Although, for me as a conductor, this was very ambiguous because I had to, as well, separate myself from my father because I had to make myself a first name and not being the son of Armin Jordan. He was never my teacher, but he was open when everything there was something I needed to know from him, from his experience, from his knowledge, talking about programming, how to deal with orchestras. He was always there to talk on the phone, I'll come over to watch a performance and discuss this. So this was a very strong influence and I could feel well with him. And he was, I must say, very encouraging because when you're a young conductor, you're insecure because you don't know how the job goes. That's not like an instrument you learn and you can play it. It's all about experience. And when I was in doubt or not sure or not happy with my work or how things work, he always was there to encourage me, and I will never forget that. Mozart invented the finales, the great finales of operas. Before there was a chorus at the end of a finale, an ensemble probably, or an aria. Mozart really started the kind of composed scenes where the orchestra is playing for 20 minutes. And this started in Nozze di Figaro, first in this fantastic second act finale, which is a perfect crescendo from the beginning to the end, and accelerando. Act 4 is the same thing. It's a 20-minute finale which follows the action and is between comedy, a night comedy, it plays in the garden, and different moments, which is going to the forgiveness of the Countess, and then to this sparkling firework where the people end the long night because it's getting day again, and the crazy day, la folle journée, is ending. Being music director at any opera house includes conducting performances. The major part of the performances, you do more than all the other guest conductors, so you can make your own mark at the house. But it's also casting the singers for your shows, and of course as well making auditions for musicians, chorus members, music staff, including as well the whole organization of planning for operas or meetings with the orchestra committee, press work to represent the house. So it's basically the entire work, which is in Paris, as the specialty of the two houses which you have, means the big Opéra Bastille and the old Opéra Garnier, which makes it even richer. And of course, the choice of guest conductors. So as well for the ballet, we have a great ballet company as well. So to make sure that the musical quality is good enough as well for this ballet company. The Paris Opera is a lot about ballet, and we have the best ballet company in the world, and so one day it was clear I wanted to do a ballet as well. Although I'm not a ballet conductor, which has the eye for dancers, for the classical ballets, so I hesitate doing that. So I prefer to do more the big ballets of the 20th century. That's why I suggested Daphnis and Chloe by Ravel. There's a very close history to the Paris Opera. With the dancers, you don't have the same contact as you have with singers as a conductor. Yeah, with singers you work on a very direct level as you work with musicians. Dancers, I was very surprised to see that although they know exactly what they want and don't want, they follow here in the Paris Opera a very hierarchical system where everything is communicated through a ballet master or a choreographer or a ballet director. It is a very special way of working, but very interesting. It's very important for any orchestra to do opera and symphony. So the same for a symphony orchestra to play opera for flexibility. So it's the same for an orchestra of an opera house, because it's when they always play in the pit and serving to the whole production, it's good to put them first of all, on stage with a complete different responsibility and where the music is in the focus. In opera, it's not only the music, it's the singing, it's the text, it's the set, the costumes. And so if something musically is not on perfection, it's not that a disaster because it's part of one thing. But if you do a symphony, the symphony is the only thing. It's only the music talking. And it has to be clear from the very first part of a symphony that starts right to make sense for the whole piece. This is very important for an orchestra, but as well doing a central repertoire, which they never would do if they only were playing Barbiere, Traviata and Tristan. Why you play another Beethoven cycle? I think that's a very popular question because, of course, we play them a lot. Of course, it's a very important repertoire. It's the base and the foundation of the symphonic repertoire. And basically because our orchestra, the Paris Opera Orchestra, has never played a Beethoven cycle and never really played Beethoven symphonies. Besides Fidelio in the opera and the Ninth Symphony, what have they played? The quality of an orchestra is knowing how to play this repertoire. And so working on this was important for us, but as well for an audience, because the audience at the Paris Opera is not the usual concert audience either. And with a cycle with 5 concerts, you can make a connection and build a relationship to the audience and the orchestra if they really follow all the 5 concerts of the cycle. The Fourth Symphony is kind of a very special symphony because it's less played than the other symphonies like 3, 5, 7, 9. But the Fourth Symphony is a very classical symphony. It's very, how Schumann said, in the Greek sense, the classical symphony, the proportions, the perfection. I think the content and the form and the timing, the duration of the symphony is in perfect shape. And as well, what I like about this symphony personally is that it is at some time a very joyful and light symphony, and at the same time a very profound. It has always in between some very profound and dark moments, like the beginning, the introduction, and always these strong moments show up, like when a cloud comes in front of the sun on a shiny day and makes you think differently. And this is especially in the second movement, I think, the perfection of the proportions and the form and the content. and the orchestration with beautiful solos like the clarinet or horn solo makes this movement to one of the pearls of the 9 symphonies. Metronome marks of Beethoven are usually very fast and faster as we knew it in the past. So in the past we always said, no, it's too fast, and Beethoven had no idea. He couldn't hear the sound, the weight of a sound of an orchestra because he couldn't hear. And it's different if you imagine a sound in your head than in reality. And actually it is possible, and the longer you go, it is possible because we stop to play Beethoven in this kind of monumental and heavy way, but more in a human way, in a more subtle way, in a more chamber orchestra classical way. And suddenly if you play it in a smaller orchestra with a different phrasing, different articulation, suddenly most of the metronome markings start to work. There's a problem with the fifth, I think, is to fall a little bit in the cliche of the famous ba-ba-ba-bam. Yeah, I mean, what does it say? Is it pathetic? Is it pathos? Or is it dramatic? Or what do you want to tell with that? And do you want to go into the monumental, or more into the classicist side, more in a Mozart way, more in a realistic way, more in a human way, or more in a heroic way? So these are decisions which need to be made. But as well, it's a symphony with a lot of surprises, because it starts with a very popular first movement, a very long and different second movement, and then you have this crescendo to this finale, which has this idea of per aspera ad astra, to this from the dark to the light, one of the first examples of this kind of symphonies. It's the first symphony which is built on one theme, on this pa-pa-pa-pam, and what times is yam, pam, pam, pam. Longer or shorter, in each movement you find this again. So I think it's quite interesting to somehow try to perform the symphony without stopping between the movements, so that you give kind of a program to the symphony that it's a first symphony which has go through one idea and not to stop between the movements.
He's now for years already a music director of the Bastille Opera in Paris, and now also of the Wiener Symphoniker in Vienna. So I'm very happy and very proud of him, Philippe Jordan.
Beethoven 9 is always a challenge for every orchestra and conductor because it's the first big symphony, not only in timing, it's the first symphony of 1 hour's length, but also of the orchestration and the musical content. So, of course, a lot of conductors until our days try to make it a harmony, a unity out of this piece. And I must say, the more I tried to do that, the more I failed with this piece. The more you start to accept that, especially this piece, just lives from all these contrasts, the cliffs and the edges and the contrast of human feeling following each other. The more you go this way, the more you serve this piece. Learning a new piece follows a certain pattern. I guess when I did Moses and Aaron by Schönberg, it took me 2 years because it's very complex. So at some point that it gets somehow natural for yourself. But basically it takes a few months to study a score, to analyze it. And I usually start with the big form. You have to start with the text. You have to decide the relations of the general tempi before you then go into the orchestration. So it's like on a computer when you have different files where you put the details, the little things in. So you first have to decide how many files you want to have, how many drawers. And when you have this, you have more order where you can put in each file all the details you want to put in. It was fascinating for me to work with an orchestra like the Wiener Symphony with a tradition and a sound, a typical Viennese sound, and to help them to find a new profile which suits in the 21st century.
Salopp und sportlich. Auf Statussymbole legt der neue Chef der Wiener Symphoniker wenig Wert. Mit 39 Jahren ist Philippe Jordan auch deutlich jünger als seine Vorgänger. Zum Amtsantritt dirigiert er Schuberts erste Symphonie. Auf den Jungstar warten große Herausforderungen. Er muss die Marke Wiener Symphoniker stärken.
Ich möchte dem Orchester eine Form geben. Das ist mir wichtig, weil es ist ja alles eigentlich da in diesem Orchester. Es ist ein fantastisches Orchester und ich möchte nur, dass klarer formuliert wird, wofür es steht.
Mehr Glanz und Glamour lautet die Devise. Vor dem Konzerthaus wird ein Stern enthüllt. Musikalisch steht die Tradition im Vordergrund. Das Orchester wird wieder mehr Bach und Mozart spielen. Als Traditionsorchester mit Pfiff will man am harten Musikmarkt bestehen.
Es wird einfach enger. Wir müssen uns mehr nach der Decke strecken. Wir müssen besser werden. Jeder muss besser werden.
Wien subventioniert das Orchester mit 12 Millionen Euro. Jordans Vertrag läuft vorerst 5 Jahre.
It is a challenge to have two positions with two major orchestras, but it's what I needed. What was important for me, because being a music director of an opera house, I always say it's kind of being a half conductor, because the other big part of a conductor is symphonic, which I found now with the Vienna Symphony. So I have two orchestras, which of course fills the calendar quite easily. So the compromise I'm doing is reducing my guest conducting to a minimum. Every nation, every singer already, every culture has its own sound. And of course, each orchestra from each country has a different sound. A German sound has more weight and density than, for example, a French sound. So a French sound I would describe as the French language, or the playing of French instruments, lighter, more transparent, more lucid, and more subtle. So it's especially the transparency and the color, as you see in French Impressionism. That's why Ravel and Debussy have been in France. My father has 20 years ago rediscovered with Erato this opera, and I did fall in love to it very fast, because it is very close to Wagner. Chausson had a great admiration to Wagner. The whole story follows Tristan and Parsifal elements, and so it's with the music. And we had the chance to have three great singers, Thomas Hampson, Roberto Alagna, and Sophie Koch, really giving star quality to this opera.
Lancelot n'a pas encore paru, pas encore, sire.
Thomas Hampson is an old friend, and we've done a lot together for many, many years. Mahler, Dr. Faust Busoni, and of course the Roi Artus. He's just one of these artists where you do music together and you understand each other. He shows something, you show something, and there's a flexibility and understanding which is very easy. But he's never tired as well to discuss things, to bring things even to another level, and this is just phenomenal with him.
Malin, aux doux amis des grands jours d'autrefois, quel genre te retient, Roi d'Artus, qui supplie. Vois sans appoint lourd, je chancelle, je plie.
The monologue that Arthur sings in the second act before Merlin appears is when Arthur has realized that this unimaginable offense to friendship and loyalty has perhaps taken place. And he doesn't want to believe it. He simply doesn't want to believe it. Because it implies to him, or it means to him, not just a betrayal of love and his wife, but a betrayal of ideal world as he would imagine it, or as he's tried to create it. And to have that, if it's true, destroyed by the very person who is the most trusted, who built this Camelot, this paradise with him, is unimaginable.
Well, there's always the question for a conductor, especially nowadays, do you use a baton or not for a concert? I'm not personally, I'm not a baton conductor. I'm not very well with a baton. I personally prefer to do with the hands. I feel freer, I can show more, it's more sensitive with the hands. But sometimes you need it, because especially in the opera or in a big orchestra, when you turn yourself to your right side, to the violins, second violins, and the first violins don't see your arms anymore, there's still the prolongement, it makes your arm longer, so they always can see your beat. Or in an opera where it's dark in the pit, they always can see that. So that's important. But in Vienna, at the Frühling in Wien, you can do this without Baton. When you do a Schubert symphony, an early one, and a Schubertiade concert, all about Schubert's songs, where it is very intimate, and a small-size orchestra, it's far more personal and richer when you can do this without Baton. Matthias Görni is just a great lead singer, and especially Schubert, he has so much to offer, and is just a wonderful artist. It's not only that he knows about the music, he knows about the content of it. He knows about the text, he knows about which poet wrote it and what is the story of the poet about it. So everything he transforms and he shows with singing that through his body language, his breathing, his phrasing, comes over very clearly to the conductor and the orchestra. But it doesn't mean he would be also very open to what I show, or how the orchestra would react. So it's a very special and enriching way of working with such an artist.
Doch endlich ward dem Diene die Zeit so lang. Macht das Bächlein hübsch grüne, und ich es gedacht, so zog seine Rute, das Fischlein zappelt dran, und ich mit regem Blute sah die Betrogene an, und ich mit regem Blute sah die Betrogene an.
The Vienna Symphony is very often, not only in Vienna, but also in outside of Vienna, seen as the second orchestra of Vienna. And this was never the case before it. Always the Philharmonics was the opera orchestra, doing concerts, of course, and the Vienna Symphony was the main concert orchestra, which it still is. So we used that to find more profile in programming, doing more cycles, like in my first year around Schubert, and also the artist in residence, which is never has been like in that form with a Viennese orchestra, like the programs Fridays at 7, where we play 1 hour of concert without intermission for a young audience, and where afterwards we go into the Konzerthaus, extra spaces where we do chamber music and jazz for a more relaxed part.
Es ist eine gute Möglichkeit, mit Publikum ein bisschen Kontakt zu haben und ein bisschen zu improvisieren auch. Das heißt, wir spielen am Ende des Konzerts nicht nur Jazz, aber trotzdem es ist einige Freiheit, der ist nicht so gewöhnlich für klassische ordentliche Konzerte.
Ich hoffe wirklich sehr, dass jüngere Leute daran Geschmack finden, weil das ist eine unglaubliche Chance, so etwas zu sehen. Und wir haben unglaublich Spaß daran. In our days, opera and stage is a very a big subject, because stage direction got more and more important. There was this time it just had to follow the story somehow, and if it was well done, it was enough. Now it has to be far more developed and tell more to the piece than it ever did before. For me, it's very important to protect the music in a way that you can perform the music quietly, that I and the orchestra, we are fine in our pit, that the singers have good acoustical conditions, and basically just that you can make music easily.
Qu'as-tu fait pour moi depuis que je te sers? Exiges-tu de toi? Rien qu'une signature sur ce vieux parchemin. Je sauve Marguerite un instant si tu jures et signes ton serment de me servir demain. Et que me fait demain quand je souffre à cette heure? Donne! Voilà mon nom, vers sa sombre demeure, volontaire maintenant. Ô douloureuse assise, Marguerite, j'accours. À moi, vortet chaour. Sur cette noire chevaux prend comme la pensée, moto et au galop, je suis se presser. Oh, mon cœur retentit, sa voix désespérée. Oh, pauvre abandonné. À ces femmes, priant au pied de cette croix. À ta porte, en avant!
I don't think I have special hobbies. I don't cut roses in my garden or anything like that. I think every musician has the privilege to do his hobby as a job or do the job as a hobby. So of course there are things, I go to the gym, I watch films at the cinema, but this I see more for relaxation than as a real hobby. So I think this is a privilege, and I don't consider my work just as a job. Conducting is a life and not only a job.